One thought can enter your mind in a second, but if you believe it long enough, it can steal years from your life. And the most dangerous part is this: the thought destroying your peace may already sound like your own voice. If you want to renew your mind, strengthen your faith, and stop fear from controlling your future, subscribe to this channel now. Every message on this channel is created to help you expose the lies, return to God's truth, and find peace in the battles no one else can see. Stay with me, because the thought controlling your life may be hiding behind one sentence you repeat every day. A sentence that sounds reasonable, a sentence that feels familiar.
I am not enough. Nothing will ever change. If I trust again, I will only be hurt again. God has forgotten me. You may have repeated that sentence for so long that it no longer sounds like fear. It sounds like your own voice. But familiarity does not make a thought true. Repetition does not turn fear into wisdom. And a lie does not gain authority simply because you have believed it for a long time. Before this message ends, you will learn how to identify that lie, discover what has been feeding it, measure it against God's truth, and know exactly what to say when it returns. Your mind is the control room of your life. Every decision passes through it. Every reaction begins inside it. Fear begins there. Resentment begins there.
But courage also begins there. Today, forgiveness begins there. And faith begins there. And faith begins there. A thought becomes an expectation. An expectation influences a decision. A decision becomes an action. An action repeated over time becomes a habit. And a habit can quietly become your future. That is why some of the greatest battles in life are fought in places no one else can see. Before someone gives up, hopelessness has usually been speaking for a long time. Before a relationship breaks, resentment has often been rehearsed in private. Before confidence disappears, comparison has repeated the same accusation again and again. Before someone walks away from a God-given opportunity, fear has already shown that person 100 imaginary disasters. The visible collapse often begins with an invisible agreement. A person agrees with the thought, "I cannot do this." A person agrees with the thought, "Nothing will ever change." A person agrees with the thought, "My past has already decided my future." Then that agreement begins influencing decisions. The person stops trying. The person stops trusting. The person stops praying. The person stops walking through doors that God may be opening. But an agreement can be withdrawn. You can stop agreeing with the thought that says you are worthless. You can stop agreeing with the fear that says your future is already ruined. You can stop agreeing with the voice that says one painful chapter defines your entire story. You may not control every thought that appears, but you can decide which thoughts receive your agreement.
We know how to create it. You are not every thought that enters your mind. You are not every feeling that moves through your heart. You are not every cruel word someone spoke over you. You are not the mistakes you regret. You are not the opportunities you missed. And you are not the worst thing that has ever happened to you. A thought may enter your mind without your permission, but it cannot build a permanent home unless you continue giving it your attention. Think about the thoughts that follow you most often. What do those thoughts say when you make a mistake? What do those thoughts say when someone does not respond to you? What do those thoughts say when another person succeeds? What do those thoughts say when you think about tomorrow? Maybe the voice says, "You are falling behind." Maybe it says, "Everyone else is doing better than you."
Maybe it says, "You will never be enough." Maybe it says, "Everyone eventually leaves." Maybe it says, "There is no point in trying again." Those thoughts may feel familiar, but familiarity is not proof. Repetition is not evidence. A lie repeated 1,000 times is still a lie, and a truth whispered in your weakest moment is still the truth. Some destructive thoughts come from old wounds. Someone rejected you, and now you expect everyone to leave. Someone betrayed you, and now closeness feels dangerous. Someone criticized you, and now every mistake feels like proof that the criticism was correct. Someone made you feel small, and now you apologize for taking up space. The person may no longer be standing in front of you, but that person's words may still be living inside you. And the deepest pain begins when you start repeating those words to yourself. I am difficult to love. I always ruin everything. No one will ever choose me. I will never change. Something must be wrong with me. Must be wrong with me. But listen carefully. What happened to you may explain the wound. It does not have the authority to define your identity. What someone said may explain why you struggle. It does not mean that what was said was true. What someone did may explain why trust is difficult. It does not mean you must remain imprisoned by that experience forever. You can acknowledge the pain without turning the pain into your name. You can remember the past without allowing the past to own your future. You can recognize what was done to you without continuing to do the same thing to yourself. Healing begins when you stop using another person's voice to describe your identity. Other destructive thoughts come from what you repeatedly consume. What you watch shapes what you imagine. What you hear shapes what you expect. What you repeatedly focus on shapes what feels important. And what feels important will continue demanding your attention. You cannot fill your mind with outrage all day and expect peace at night. You cannot constantly consume comparison and expect gratitude to grow. You cannot rehearse every possible disaster and then wonder why your body remains tense. You cannot feed fear for hours and expect 1 minute of prayer to silence everything immediately. This does not mean you must ignore reality. It means you must become intentional about what receives your attention. Attention is food. Repetition is food. Imagination is food. Whatever you repeatedly feed will grow stronger. Imagine that your mind is a garden. Every repeated thought is a seed. Some seeds produce gratitude. Some produce patience. Some produce courage. Some produce peace. Other seeds produce resentment. Some produce anxiety. Some produce shame. And some produce hopelessness. You cannot plant fear every morning and expect to harvest peace every night. You cannot water resentment and expect love to grow. You cannot feed comparison and expect contentment to become stronger. You cannot rehearse defeat and expect courage to appear when you need it. So ask yourself one honest question. What have I been feeding? Have I been feeding the memory of what someone did to me? Have I been feeding fear about something that has not happened? Have I been feeding shame by remembering my failures and forgetting God's grace? Have I been feeding comparison by measuring my private struggle against another person's, door's, public success? Have I been feeding anger by replaying the same conversation every day? Have I been feeding rejection by interpreting every silence as abandonment? Maybe the thought became powerful, not because it was true. Maybe it became powerful because it was fed every day. Maybe you fed it with your attention. Maybe you fed it with repetition. Maybe you fed it by imagining the worst result over and over again. But what has been fed can also be starved. You can stop replaying the conversation. You can stop imagining the disaster. You can stop reopening the wound simply to prove that it still hurts. You can stop allowing yesterday to explain every person you meet today. You can stop using your worst memory as evidence against your future. You can stop asking fear for permission to live. You do not have to answer every thought. You do not have to debate every accusation. Sometimes the strongest answer is to refuse to give the thought any more attention. Not every voice deserves a conversation. Not every fear deserves an investigation. And not every thought deserves a place at the table of your life. Fear often creates an entire story from one unanswered question. You send someone a message. Several hours pass, and there is no reply. Your mind says, something is wrong. Then it says, I must have offended them. Then it says, they no longer care about me.
Then it says, they are going to leave within minutes. A delayed response has become rejection, abandonment, and heartbreak. But what do you actually know? You know that the message has not yet been answered. That is all you know. Everything else is an interpretation created by fear. A neutral moment became a painful story because fear was allowed to complete the missing information. This happens in many areas of life. One mistake becomes, I always fail. One disagreement becomes, this relationship is ending. One closed door becomes, God has abandoned me. One difficult season becomes, my life will always be this way. Fear takes a temporary moment and gives it a permanent conclusion. So ask yourself, what do I truly know? Ask, what am I assuming? Ask, is there another reasonable explanation? Ask, am I responding to this moment, or am I responding to an old wound? Ask, is this thought leading me toward wisdom, or only deeper into fear? Inly, when you stop and examine a thought, you interrupt its power to control your reaction. Taking control of your thoughts does not mean you will never experience another negative thought. It means a negative thought can appear without becoming your master. Fear may speak, but fear does not have to decide. Shame may knock, but shame does not have to enter. Regret may remind you of yesterday, but regret does not have the authority to name tomorrow. Uncertainty may surround you, but uncertainty does not mean God has abandoned you. You can notice a thought without surrendering to it. Instead of saying, I am a failure, say, I am noticing the thought that I might fail. Instead of saying, no one cares about me, say, I feel alone right now, and loneliness is changing the way I see this moment. Instead of saying, everything is hopeless, say, I cannot see the answer yet. Instead of saying, I cannot handle this, say, my mind is predicting that I cannot handle this. Instead of saying, God has forgotten me, say, I am afraid because I have not seen an answer yet. That change may appear small, but it creates distance between you and the thought. And inside that distance, you recover the ability to choose. You can experience fear without allowing fear to lead. You can experience failure without becoming a failure. You can experience rejection without becoming unworthy of love. You can walk through uncertainty without being abandoned by God. No. The Bible tells us to set our minds on things above. Notice the word set. It describes an intentional direction. It means your mind does not have to remain wherever fear places it. You can redirect it. You can bring it back to truth. You can return it to the character of God. Scripture also gives us a filter for our thinking. Is this thought true? Is it honorable? Is it right? Is it pure? Does it lead toward love, wisdom, and courage? Or does it produce panic, hatred, confusion, and despair? The Bible does not tell you to pretend that pain is not real. It teaches you not to let pain become the only truth you can see. You can acknowledge that this season is difficult and still believe that God is faithful. You can admit that you are tired and still believe that strength can return. You can grieve what was lost and still believe that your life contains purpose. You can face reality without surrendering your future to despair. God is not frightened by the thoughts that frighten you. God is not confused by the future you cannot understand.
God is not absent simply because you cannot feel His presence. God has not forgotten you because an answer has not yet arrived. And God has not stopped working simply because you cannot yet see the result. There are moments when faith does not feel dramatic. Sometimes faith means getting out of bed when your mind tells you to hide. Sometimes faith means remaining silent when anger wants to speak. Sometimes faith means praying when your mind is too tired to form beautiful words. Sometimes faith means taking one more step without seeing the entire road. Sometimes faith is simply refusing to give up today. God does not overlook those quiet acts of faith. God sees every time you choose truth while fear is shouting. God sees every time you forgive while the wound is still tender. God sees every time you rise after believing you have no strength left. God sees the battle no one else can see. You do not need perfect words to speak to God. Sometimes the most honest prayer is the most powerful prayer. God, my thoughts are exhausting me. I do not know how to silence every voice. I do not know how to answer every fear, but I do not want fear to lead me anymore. Show me what is true. Help me recognize what is false. Help me release what I was never meant to carry. Teach me to recognize your voice above the noise. Renew my mind, one thought at a time. That prayer may sound small, but heaven does not measure prayer by performance. God listens to sincerity. God responds to surrender. Surrender is not the same as giving up. Surrender means giving God what you were never designed to carry alone. Now let us make this practical. The first step is to recognize the thought. When fear appears, name it. Say, "This is fear trying to predict the future." When shame appears, name it. Say, "This is shame trying to turn my past into my identity." When comparison appears, name it. Say, "I am comparing two lives without knowing the whole story." When resentment appears, name it. Say, "I am reopening this wound and allowing yesterday to enter today." Naming a thought creates distance from it. And within that distance, you regain the ability to respond with wisdom. The second step is to question the thought. Ask, "Is this completely true?" Ask, "What evidence do I actually have?" Ask, "Am I remembering facts or am I rehearsing fear?" Ask, "Is this thought helping me respond wisely?" Ask, "What would I say to someone I love if that person believed this thought?" Many people speak to others with compassion, but speak to themselves with cruelty. They forgive someone else for being tired, but condemn themselves for needing rest. They encourage someone else to try again, but call themselves a failure after one mistake. They tell someone else that healing takes time, but become angry when their own pain does not disappear quickly. You cannot heal a wounded mind by continuing to wound it.
Correction does not require cruelty. Growth does not require self-hatred. Responsibility does not require shame. You can acknowledge what must change without declaring yourself worthless. You can regret a decision without believing your life is ruined. You can accept responsibility without abandoning grace. The third step is to replace the thought. A dark room does not become bright because you argue with the darkness. The room changes when you introduce light. Do not merely say, "I will not be afraid." Say, "I do not know what tomorrow holds, but I will not face tomorrow alone." Do not merely say, "I will stop thinking about my past." Say, "My past may explain some of my wounds, but it does not own my future." Do not merely say, "I must never feel weak." Say, "I am tired, but God can meet me here."
Do not merely say, "I cannot fail again." Say, "Even if I stumble, I can learn, rise, and continue." Do not merely say, "No one cares about me." Say, "I feel alone in this moment, but my feelings do not contain the whole truth. Truth may not immediately change your circumstances, but truth changes the position from which you face them. The fourth step is to protect what enters your mind. Pay attention to what reaches you first in the morning. Pay attention to what you watch before sleeping. Pay attention to what you watch before sleeping. Pay attention to the conversations that leave you angry, fearful, or empty. Pay attention to how your mind changes after spending time with certain content. Protecting your peace requires protecting what repeatedly receives your attention.
The fifth step is to repeat the truth. Destructive thinking is rarely formed in one moment. Renewed thinking is rarely formed in one moment either. You practice it. You return to it. You choose truth again when the old thought comes back. You choose truth in the morning. You choose truth in disappointment. You choose truth when you feel strong. And you choose truth when your voice is trembling. Do not become discouraged when an old thought returns. Old thoughts often revisit places where they once felt welcome. Their return does not mean you have lost the battle. Their return gives you another opportunity to answer differently. Every time fear speaks and you choose faith, you are building a new pattern. Every time shame speaks and you remember grace, you are building a new pattern. Every time resentment speaks and you choose forgiveness, you are building a new pattern. Every time hopelessness speaks and you take another faithful step, you are building a new pattern. A transformed life is often built through decisions that appear very small. One prayer before reacting, one moment of silence before speaking, one truthful sentence written in a journal, one decision to close the screen and open the scriptures, one choice to rest instead of condemning yourself, one courageous step taken while fear is still present. Maybe anxiety has been speaking to you for years. Maybe resentment has lived in your heart for so long that it feels like part of your personality. Maybe the voice of shame has been present for so long that you cannot remember what life felt like without it. Maybe you have tried to change before, and now you are afraid to hope again. You are not beyond renewal. You are not too late. You are not too late. You are not disqualified because the process is taking longer than you expected. God can work patiently in the places where you have become impatient with yourself. You do not need strength for the next 10 years. You need courage for the next faithful decision. A new life does not always begin with a dramatic miracle. Sometimes it begins in a quiet room. Sometimes it begins with tired eyes and an open Bible. Sometimes it begins with a trembling prayer. Sometimes it begins when one exhausted person decides, I will not keep agreeing with this lie. That decision may be invisible to everyone else, but God sees beginnings that the world cannot yet recognize. No, tonight, the old thought may return. It may ask, what if nothing changes? It may ask, what if you fail again? It may ask, what if everyone leaves? It may ask, what if God has forgotten you? Do not panic when it speaks. Do not treat its presence as proof of its authority. Look at the thought, name the thought, test the thought against truth, and answer it. You may have entered my mind, but you will not build my future. You may remind me of yesterday, but you will not name tomorrow. You may make me feel afraid, but you will not make my decisions. You may speak loudly, but truth will have the final word. I will not give fear the authority that belongs to God. I will not allow shame to erase grace. I will not allow one disappointment to convince me that my story is over. I will not allow another person's opinion to become my identity, and I will not abandon the life God is still rebuilding. Take a slow breath. You do not have to solve everything tonight. You do not have to understand every chapter. You do not have to know exactly how the story will end. You do not have to carry tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. You only need to take the next faithful step. One true thought, one honest prayer, one wise decision, one peaceful breath at a time. If this message brought you peace, share it with someone who may be silently fighting the same battle. You do not need to explain everything. Simply send the video and say, "You do not have to fight this alone." Then write this declaration in the comments. Today, I will stop feeding the thought that says, "I am not enough." Your words may encourage another person who needs the same reminder. And if you have not subscribed yet, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Join this community as we continue learning how to renew the mind, strengthen our faith, and walk through difficult seasons with God's truth. Your mind is listening to the words you repeat. So speak with patience, speak with courage, speak with faith, and above all, speak with truth. You are not every thought that enters your mind. You are not alone in this battle. God is still with you. God is still working, and your story is not finished.